Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Today we are starting a new canto. I know every temple is at its own pace and does its own thing. And today we are starting with the 9th canto. It's called Liberation. And the first chapter is called King Sudyumna Becomes a Woman. So this is a very interesting part. People who don't believe in the Bhagavatam and Krishna consciousness will think that this is kind of science fiction. So, in the previous canto we had the story of Matsya and King Satyavrata, who was saved, and that king later on became Vaivasvata Manu in his next birth. This is the next question that King Parikshit is asking Shukadeva Goswami. This chapter starts with a lot of verses without purports, and I will read until verse 17, but we can start with the first verse together. Shirajovacha Manvantarani Sarvani Manvantarani Sarvani Tvayuktani Shrutani Me Anyone want to chant? Shirajovacha Manvantarani Sarvani Vayamtani Shrutani Me Viyanyananda Virasya Shirajovacha. King Parikshit said, Manvantarani, all about the periods of the various manus. Sarvani, all of them. Tvaya, by you. Uktani, have been described. the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has unlimited potency. Hare, of the Supreme Lord. Hare. Tatra, in those Manvantara periods. Kritani, which have been performed. Cha, also. Before I continue, how many languages are we here today? Like you're translating for, or you're just sitting next to her? Okay. No, I'm just checking. Okay. Alright. King Parikshit said, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Parikshit said, My Lord Shukadev Goswami, you have elaborately described all the periods of the various manus, and within those periods, the wonderful activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has unlimited potency. I am fortunate to have heard all of this from you. So verse 2 and 3. Satyavrata, the saintly king of Dravida Desh, who received spiritual knowledge at the end of the last millennium by the grace of the Supreme, later became Vaivasvata Manu, the son of Vivasvan, in the next Manvantara, period of Manu. I have received this knowledge from you. I also understand that such kings as Ikshvaku were his sons, as you have already explained. Verse 4. O greatly fortunate Shukadev Goswami, O great Brahmana, kindly describe to us separately the dynasties and characteristics of all those kings, for we are always eager to hear such topics from you. Number 5. Kindly tell us about the abilities of all the celebrated kings born in the dynasty of Vaivasvata Manu, including those who have already passed, those who may appear in the future, and those who exist at present. Sutta Goswami said, when Shukadev Goswami, the greatest knower of religious principles, was thus requested by Maharaj Parikshit in the assembly of all the scholars learned in Vedic knowledge, he then proceeded to speak. Shukadev Goswami continued, O king, subduer of your enemies, now hear from me in great detail about the dynasty of Manu. I shall explain as much as possible, although one could not say everything about it, even in 100 years. Remember, they only had 7 days, so it was kind of, everything was really compact. The Transcendental Supreme Person, the Super Soul of all living entities who are in different statuses of life, high and low, existed at the end of the millennium, when neither this manifested cosmos nor anything else but him existed. Purport. Taking the proper position from which to describe the dynasty of Manu, Shukadev Goswami begins by saying that when the entire world is inundated, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead exists and nothing else. Shukadev Goswami will now describe how the Lord creates other things, one after another. So I'm going to read a little bit further. O King Parikshit, from the navel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead was generated a golden lotus on which the four-faced Lord Brahma took his birth. From the mind of Lord Brahma, Marichi took birth, and from the semen of Marichi, Kashyapa appeared from the womb of the daughter of Daksha Maharaj. From Kashyapa, by the womb of Aditi, Vivasvan took birth. O king, best of the Bharat dynasty, from Vivasvan, by the womb of Samgya, Shraddhadev Manu was born. Shraddhadev Manu having conquered his senses, begot 10 sons in the womb of his wife Shraddha. The names of these sons were Ikshvaku, Mriga, Sharyati, Drishta, Karushaka, Narishyanta, Prishadra, Nabaga, and Kavi. Manu at first had no sons. So this is always the thing in Bhagavatam, no son. That's like the biggest problem that the kings have, is when they have no sons. Manu had first had no son. Therefore, in order to get a son from him, get a son for him, the great saint Vashishta, who was very powerful in spiritual knowledge, performed a sacrifice to satisfy the demigods Mitra and Varuna. During the sacrifice, hear this, during the sacrifice, Shraddha, his wife, Manu's wife, who was observing the vow of subsisting only by drinking milk, approached the priest offering the sacrifice, offered obeisances to him, and begged for a daughter. Okay, next verse. Told by the chief priest, now offer oblations. The person in charge of oblations took clarified butter to offer. He then remembered the request of Manu's wife and performed the sacrifice while chanting the word Vashat. Manu had begun the sacrifice for the sake of getting a son, but because the priest was diverted by the request of Manu's wife, a daughter named Ila was born. Upon seeing the daughter, Manu was not very satisfied. Thus he spoke to his guru, Vashishta, as follows. Purport. Because Manu had no issue, he was pleased at the birth of a child, even though a daughter, and gave her the name Ila. Later, however, he was not very satisfied to see the daughter instead of a son. Because he had no issue, he was certainly very glad at the birth of Ila, but his pleasure was temporary. Very strange chapter. Okay. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupada Kadamayam Tarati Svavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Savetam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Panchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavbhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we see a lot of things that we can sort of understand that, this is how people work. Number one, Parikshit Maharaj was very interested in knowing about the dynasties of Manu. So, for some other reason, we as people like knowing our history. We like knowing where we come from. There's even a very popular TV series called Who Do You Think You Are, where the famous people like singers or actors or politicians or whatever, they make a whole episode of them researching their genealogy, so their family history basically. And it's fascinating to watch that series because if you understand the principle of karma, then you can understand, you can very definitely see that they there is something like generational karma that comes from many, many forefathers through. Like usually when someone is a musician, then at some stage there's a musical streak through the family, or someone who is a famous writer, who's a single mother, struggled, and she basically comes from a long line of single mothers who had to struggle with their life. So somehow our family history fascinates us. But Maharaj Parikshit was not so mundane. He wanted to know about the great kings, because the great kings of that time was very spiritual. The kings of that time wasn't just born and then chosen. They were very qualified. So, and they were all devotees. Not all of them, but most of them were very great devotees. So it's very interesting for us to know about these kings. And then the second thing is that the kings those days, these days it's not such a problem, but those days you had to have a son. The kingdom and the rule of the kingdom could not go to a daughter. I think, I mean in Europe, I don't know when it changed, but I think, yeah, it wasn't so long ago that rule still applied. Maybe 500 years ago, it was changed, and now people can, the crown can go to the oldest child, basically a son or a daughter. But those days the kings needed a son. We know of so many stories in the Bhagavatam where this question of having a son was very important. Pandu, Maharaj Pandu was one. He didn't have any children, so he had 5 Pandavas. Maharaj Chitraketu, he wanted a son who was killed, poisoned by his by the co-wives. Dronacharya, Draupad, the father of Draupadi, had Drishtadyumna, and now, so many. So the son is very important. But then I don't know if you have this experience, but when I know of so many friends who have children or get children or whatever, and then there's always a thing of the woman wants a girl and the man wants a boy. That's just sort of how it is. But it is interesting because the priest should actually not have been diverted by the wife, but it just goes to show how strong we are as ladies in convincing someone to do something. That's sort of that's one of our Shaktis, is our influence, sometimes the emotional influence. But as it said, the king wasn't unhappy about the daughter. There's another story about in Krishna book. You can, I don't know, I can't remember if you can specifically read it in Krishna book, but in Mahabharata you definitely can. That Kunti Devi was actually the adopted daughter of her father. Her father's friend had no children. So then they asked Kunti's biological father, okay, if you have a daughter, please give us a daughter. So they had her, and then Kunti went to this family. Because a daughter is just as the daughter is also valuable in those days, because the kings had to marry. So the daughters were kind of bargaining chips in political systems. It doesn't sound so nice, but the daughters also were very valuable because they were the mothers of society and they were the queens. So Maharaj Vaivasvata Manu. Where was it? I forgot the name. Yeah, so Manu. The Manu, Vaivasvata Manu, was not unhappy with the girl, but he wanted a boy. And instead of just doing another yagya to get a son, this daughter, it has sort of a very interesting story. That he went to Vashishta Muni, his guru, and he did, you'll see that he is going to do some prayers, and this daughter is going to, in her form, change from a woman to a man. It's almost the same as Shikandi in the Mahabharata, where he was also born as a daughter, and then he swapped his essential parts with a yaksha, and he became a man, and he stayed a man for the rest of his life. So the Mahabharata, the Bhagavatam is full of stories like that, and yeah, we can ask ourselves why, but it is interesting because so let me just read I'm just going to read part of the summary so that we know what's going to happen. So Shadadev, or Vaivasvata Manu, the father of Maharaj Ikshvaku, was sonless, also childless, before Ikshvaku's birth. But by the grace of great sage Vasishta, he performed a yagya to satisfy Mitra and Varuna. Then, although Vaivasvata Manu wanted a son, by the desire of his wife, he got a daughter named Ila. Manu, however, was not satisfied with a daughter. Consequently, for Manu's satisfaction, the great sage Vasishta prayed for Ila to be transformed into a boy, and his prayer was fulfilled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, Ila became a beautiful young man named Sudyumna. And that's not all. Once upon a time, Sudyumna went on tour with his ministers. At the foot of the mountain Sumeru, there is a forest named Shukumara, and as soon as they entered the forest, they were all transformed into women. When Maharaj Parikshit inquired from Shukadev Goswami about the reason for this transformation, Shukadev Goswami described how Sudyumna, being transformed into a woman, accepted Buddha, the son of the moon, as her husband, and had a son named Pururava. By the grace of Lord Shiva, Sudyumna received the benediction that he would live 1 month as a woman and 1 month as a man. Thus he regained his kingdom and had 3 sons named Utkala, Gaya, and Vimala, who were all very religious. Thereafter he entrusted his kingdom to Pururava and took the order of Vanaprastha life. Can you imagine having a life where you have to live 1 month as a woman, 1 month as a man? But it's interesting because these days we have in our modern culture more and more we have people who are transgender. So the whole debate about transgenderism, people who go to Thailand or to wherever to have sex changes, and they could say, but it's described in the Bhagavatam, here is a person who has a sex change every month. But the point is that he and she could have, she was reproductively, it was possible to reproduce in both forms. Today, if you're born in a body of a man and you change yourself to a woman, then there's no possibility of reproduction. So that's why it is so, yeah, it's very ukrakama. But the point is that I can't imagine what a crazy life that must have been. But we'll see that whatever happened to this king, man or woman, the point is that we should all just focus on serving Krishna in whatever form we have. That's the constant that we have to focus on, is no matter what body you have, no matter what situation you have in life, there's always some way in which we can serve Krishna. If you're very sick, then you may not be able to do so much physically, but Krishna is just as happy with Manasa Puja, for instance, or anything that we can do in the mind. We know of stories in the Bhagavatam of very, very poor brahmanas who couldn't afford anything, but they did Manasa Puja to the Lord, and it became so real that they stuck their finger in the hot sweet rice in their mind, and then their real finger became burnt. So this is a very, we'll see what happens with the dynasty, but that's the point that we can all focus on, is that no matter what goes on in our life, being a devotee of Krishna is apart from being man or woman. In this life, we all have different forms. We have we have female forms, we have male forms, we have whatever. You have your package to work with, but essentially, whatever that package is, the point is that you have to use it for Krishna. And if Krishna takes something away and gives you something else, then you use that for Krishna. Whichever way. It's much easier said than done, but that's what we have to learn in this lifetime. And yeah, so this is a short introduction to the chapter. Do you have any other questions or comments? Yes?
I have a small beginner question, because I have very little knowledge about the histories. This moon, the son of the moon god Buddha, this is not the same like the avatar, it's not the same like the incarnation Buddha. It's different personality.
I'm not sure. No.
Well, there are multiple Buddhas in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, there are multiple Buddhas. I
I
think Buddha, our Buddha, the Buddha, the incarnation Buddha is also spelled differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is because you had two main dynasties of Kshatriyas. You had the sun god dynasty, like Ram, Lord Ramachandra comes from the sun dynasty. That's why he's also called the Sun Prince in one of the books that one of our devotees wrote. And then you have the moon from Chandra, and that's where Krishna comes from. So Krishna is from the line of the moon dynasty, and Lord Ramachandra is from the sun dynasty. So you have a lot of these kings are from, but this one comes from the sun dynasty, and but also we see that the moon is also there. So no, it's not the avatar. I don't think the avatar Buddha actually married ever. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure it appears in the Bhagavatam.
No.
There's a reference in the second canto.
No.
And there's a reference to Buddhas in
Yeah, I mean,
but not to Gautama Buddha.
Yeah, I don't think that Buddha married, but I can research it. But also, in terms of, we'll see that it's also mentioned here that the four-headed Brahma, there are many different types of Brahmas. So so this is basically the story. This Bhagavatam is the story of our universe and a lot of other universes, but our Brahma, the Brahma now, has 4 heads, but there are Brahmas with 10 heads or 5. I mean, there are many different Brahmas as well. So We just get one version of the Bhagavatam. Any other? Okay. Thank you very much. It was a very short class. You're all here for the wedding? Oh, okay. When does it start tomorrow?
Today will be Aldi.
Haldi. Okay, I remember. I didn't have my haldi ceremony. I would have looked jaundiced, but I had my. Did you already do the mehndi?
Not doing mehndi.
Not doing mehndi. I had my mehndi. That was interesting. Okay, thank you very much for your presence and your attention. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.